Okay, so I feel like this is going to be controversial, but it kind of touches on many of the things I'm interested in. So, this video is about SARA HESS. I think it's pronounced SARA HESS, it might be Sarah Hess. She's a writer for House of the Dragon, and the internet has decided that they hate her. She's getting a lot of criticism, just put this down. She's getting a lot of criticism right now, a lot of anger, a lot of hatred, and basically I want to examine, are we seeing, I feel like I'm in House of the Dragon, it's like, is she as bad as everyone says? Is she this evil woman? Or is the criticism, like, valid? You know, I don't like to blanket criticism as all, like, one thing, because, you know, I've kind of, I mean, I did my creative writing masters, like, I like to examine fiction. I don't mind criticism of fiction. I think it's really important. And I've often, like, been someone who, like, I started by criticising, like, Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who, which will probably actually link me to a lot of people who like House of the Dragon, because they both star Matt Smith and he does an amazing job in both shows. But I started making criticism about how I perceived a sexist kind of tone and sexism in the material, and because I was doing that, I was kind of, like, written off as, like, some, like, crazed, like, feminist killjoy kind of thing, even though it was just crit. So I know what it feels like to have valid criticism of a writer and to be written off. And I want to kind of investigate, is it that situation? Is it a She-Hulk situation? Because this kind of extends beyond House of the Dragon. It's like a thing that we have to contend with now, because criticising writers is a good thing. Like, I really think it is. I'm a writer, like, I'm, you know, I'm working on, my novel's kind of, like, in the process of almost being finished. And I just don't think that criticism is, like, a bad thing. You don't have to agree with everyone's criticism, but toxic positivity just kills, I hate it so much, you know, that kind of enforced, we're given this content so we must enjoy it. It's like, really? It frustrates me very much. And I've had issues with the Doctor Who fandom because of that, because it's all very, like, nicey and, oh, we all love it and it's so good, and it's like, do you? How can you? They're all different episodes written by different writers in different tones, and the eras all had different tones. Like, it's just dishonest. But anyway, yeah, so I wanted to investigate this situation, because what I'm seeing is, so SARA HESS is a woman, so she's a female writer writing for the show. She's writing a show about patriarchy centred on female characters. But a lot of the people who really are angry with her, a lot of the fan base seem to be women as well. Which is, it's just really, I don't even know what to make of it. So I thought we'd get into it. So you might have seen on Twitter, like, if you search her name up, there's so many tweets about how, you know, she's united the Greens and the Blacks and everyone hates her and petitions to get her off the show. And she's actually been, they've announced that she's going to be doing season 2. You know, she's been taken on to do season 2. Now, where did this kind of start? Because I only really started hearing criticism of her around the time she gave an interview in which she spoke about her thoughts on Daemon Targaryen, played by Matt Smith, also the 11th Doctor. I really love the 11th Doctor, when he wasn't being written in a sexist manner. But, like, I really like the 11th Doctor. And Matt Smith's, like, such a charismatic actor. I don't, you know, this isn't a video about Daemon, but I can understand why people are attracted to the character simply because he's charismatic. Matt Smith, like, draws you to him in the scene. But, you know, I don't think he's, like, a nice guy as a character. But yeah, I mean, I can see the charisma, of course, like, he's brilliant. Right, so yeah, if I'm looking at this right now, like, I'm just on the tag, pictures of Alison and Daemon, get them away from SARA HESS immediately. A lot of this is about Daemon, really, and it's people whose profile pictures often have Rhaenyra or Daemon in them. But I don't want to just, like, discount, I think there is a certain, I am going to say, I think there is a certain group of people who have kind of created a character out of Daemon in their heads because they're attracted to him, Matt Smith, and the charisma. And I will say this, I'm going to get into what SARA has actually said and whether or not I think it's valid, like, it's only my opinion. But I do also think that part of the problem is that some people are wanting Daemon to be something that he isn't in the show. And I understand they're two different perspectives, because if you're a book reader and you're reading that and you want it to be faithful to that I understand. Because, you know, that's, even though the book is unreliable, you can still kind of ascertain certain things are hinted at. For example, Daemon's relationship with Laena in the book is implied to actually be quite a loving one, like, it seems to be quite a good one. We can't know, obviously, anything in the book because it's all, like, sources that are, like, fourth hand, like, they're so far away. and it's written by people who weren't involved. But, you know, I can understand things like that. Like, those are criticisms that make sense to me because I've read the book as well, and I can see that. What I don't understand is people who are watching the show version of Daemon and love show Daemon, so it's a different person to the person that we imagine in the books. Well, there's several, you know, if you read the book you can imagine several different Daemons. I think we've all got a different one in our minds if we've read the book, like depending on who we kind of side with, like what sources we trust, that kind of thing. But yeah, I can understand that. But if you're somebody who's loved him in the show itself, I don't think that Sarah Hess is now ruining him, if that makes sense. Like, I understand being angry about how he's being portrayed in the show if you have a certain idea about him from the books. But that has been him, you know, he has been being written this way all season. So it's not really a surprise. And I often think some people's reading of him has been clouded by the fact he's played by Matt Smith. He's kind of been romanticised by a lot of people. And they've actually missed things that are happening on the screen. You know, it's kind of a very romanticised picture which exists. It's not in their minds so much because the show also leans into it at certain points. But I think that's part of what the show intends, if that makes sense. Like, I think he's meant to be charismatic, a loose cannon, like you want to watch him. You're almost alongside Rhaenyra in some ways, but he's also dangerous and untrustworthy. And these are things that, for example, Rhaenyra doesn't know about him. You know, like, for example, when he kills his wife, Rhaenyra doesn't know he's done that. You know, she might have suspicions about what he's done, but there's a lot about him which is quite shady. I do understand the charisma aspects, but I think people have romanticised him. It's like, I've noticed there's a lot of overlap between Daemon and Rhaenyra fans and Raylo fans, which is so weird. Well, it's not really weird, because I guess it's the same kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with liking, like, a sort of toxic relationship in fiction. Like, I'm a writer, I read all the time. I love it too. Like, I love reading those stories. But there's a difference between enjoying them, like Wuthering Heights, love Wuthering Heights. But then there's a difference between enjoying it and romanticising it, if that makes sense, you know? And I think some people have they've gone a little bit too far because they've now tried to romanticize it into something it isn't, which seems like a disservice to the characters anyway, because, you know, in good drama, like, I want to see messy relationships and difficult people. And I think when people romanticize things like that, I kind of feel like it's like an imagined thing they're doing in their heads. Sorry to, like, I've no disrespect to any of those people, like, especially if you're, you know, there's no shame in enjoying Daemon or liking, like, the way he's playing it, or, you know, loving Matt Smith or anything like that. You know, there's no shame in it at all. But the romanticising of him based on what we've had on screen doesn't make sense. And it's not that the show's made a misstep there, in my view. It's that maybe the viewer hasn't picked up on it because of his charisma, which might actually be a good part of the show, really. I mean, that's Rhaenyra's story, isn't it? I think it mirrors Rhaenyra. She's kind of so absorbed by the charisma, and, you know, how you kind of want to be around him. Like, he's powerful, like, he's quite attractive, like, but I think that's part of him. Anyway, that's enough of my opinions on that. Let's get to the actual initial interview, which kind of started off this kind of anti-Sarah Hess situation. Okay, so it's by The Hollywood Reporter. House of the Dragon producer baffled Daemon Targaryen has become an internet boyfriend. Writer, executive producer Sarah Hess and director Claire Kilner discuss the online desire for Matt Smith's murderous character. How is he a good partner? Okay. It was there from the first episode of House of the Dragon, and after last week's episode, the thirsty tweets and memes really exploded. The murderous Daemon Targaryen, Matt Smith, is an object of online desire. You know, can't argue with that, it's true. Two moments in particular seemed to send admirers over the top. The prince helping his estranged brother, ailing King Viserys, as he stumbled on his way to the Iron Throne, and then beheading Vaemon Velaryon, who committed treason by insulting Daemon's wife Rhaenyra. Never mind that Daemon also murdered his previous wife merely because she was inconvenient. That was 4 whole episodes ago. Now, I can tell. I know it's not nice to hear if you're someone who enjoys Daemon, and honestly, I'm going to be in the same boat, because one of the characters I enjoy is Aemond. And he's about to get completely indefensible. I know the pain, like, I do get it. But that's very true. You know, Daemon, early on, we've seen this is a man who killed his wife, he called her ugly in public, made jokes about how awful she was unfaithful to her, and then I don't know whether he went there to kill her, but when she was really injured and dying, he was going to leave her alone, and because she said a nasty comment, like, to the man that was going to leave her dying, he, we assume, like, you know, killed her quite brutally. Because she was inconvenient. Like, that's a thing we've all seen on the show. And, you know, that's why I think people romanticising Daemon are actually wrong. I don't necessarily think it's Sarah Hess in that instance, or the show. I think that the show has made that pretty obvious, you know? I know that when I first got introduced to Daemon on the show, I was like, I don't know what to make of you. Like, do I like you? Do I not like you? And then I gradually started to see that stuff. And it was when he killed, I think it was when he killed his wife, that I suddenly thought, oh, okay. I see what this is. I get it. Okay, so here's the interview. The first question is, some viewers have really fallen for Daemon after that last episode when he helped his brother as he stumbled on the way to the throne to decide the heir of Driftmark. But wasn't that Daemon helping the king do what he wanted him to do anyway, to make a ruling in his daughter's favour? If Viserys was about to rule against Rhaenyra, Daemon would have let his brother fall flat on his face. In other words, aren't all of Daemon's moments, even the seemingly benevolent ones, ultimately self-serving? Hess replied, I agree with you. He's become internet boyfriend in a way that baffles me. Not that Matt isn't incredibly charismatic and wonderful, and he's incredible in the role, but Daemon himself is... I don't want him to be my boyfriend. I'm a little baffled how they're all, oh, daddy, and I'm just like, really? How? In what way? In what way was he a good partner, father or brother to anybody? You got me. He ain't Paul Rudd. What do you think, Claire? Kilner, for her part, seemed to relate a bit to the feels. I just love the fact that people are so involved with these characters, and I think that's part of the fun of it, she said. One minute you like someone, and the next minute you like someone else. But I'm not surprised. Matt is such a risk taker in his performances, and he's got that little smile, and, you know, you can't help it. He is charismatic. People love a baddie, but I don't think he's particularly a good father or a good brother. Okay, so this is the part that a lot of people have taken issue with. And I'm just going to say right away, I can't actually see anything inaccurate in what they said, really. I know it can be uncomfortable if you're somebody who, like, really likes Daemon, but it's not necessarily untrue. And again, I feel your pain. I'm really into the soaps, and when you get into the soaps, you start to become accustomed to characters being murderous, doing awful things, and you'll like them anyway. But it's still true, you know, they still do the bad thing. You know, that's part of the genre, and I think maybe that's part of the problem. Like, that is House of the Dragon, that is the genre we're looking at, so, you know, I don't think romanticising any character in this sort of franchise is necessarily a good idea. So the interviewer was saying about when Daemon helped his brother up the stairs, and yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that Daemon loves Viserys. I think we've seen that on the screen. But loving someone doesn't mean being a good sibling to them, you know? He is, you know, when Viserys is dying, Rhaenyra's kind of there trying to connect, and Daemon is pushing for the claim. You need to give Luke Driftmark. I don't think it's deniable that he loves Viserys. Like, I don't think that's up for debate. I think the show makes that pretty clear. But is he a good brother with it? You know, it's like Thor and Loki. Like, is Loki a good brother to Thor? Or was he a good brother to Thor while he was, you know, doing the whole evil thing? No. Does he love Thor? Yes. An example from, you know, something I love. I'm obsessed. I love Emmerdale, by the way. And last night they killed off one of my favourite characters and I cried really badly. And I did not like the way they did it either. It was horrible. But one of my favourite relationships is two brothers called Andy and Robert Sugden. And I was in a similar situation to some of you guys who like Daemon, because one of my favourite characters is Robert Sugden, and he's like a villain in the soap, you know? He has good points and he has bad points. He's morally very grey. Does he love his brother? Yes. Is he a good brother? No. Like, it's different things, you know? He is helping, like, I think there's nuance to the scene. Like, he's obviously helping Viserys because he feels pity for his brother, but it's true that it's also a self-serving thing, you know? If Viserys had been going to rule the other way, it would be interesting to see what Daemon did, because what we've seen in the past is that Daemon sulks when he can't get his own way, you know? He pushes Viserys for things, and when he doesn't get them, he gets angry and he plots about it. And I'm not saying he doesn't love his brother, but that is what he does. You know, this was something that was going in his favour, so he's obviously feeling like, you know, close to his brother in that moment. It's interesting sometimes I think about relationships, you know, the strength of a relationship. It's not about how you treat the person when they're doing something you want or need. It's how you treat the person when they're not doing that. You know, like if they're having a different opinion to you, if they feel differently, if they don't necessarily agree with you, how do you treat them? And, you know, that's interesting, because we're all nice to people who are doing what we want, aren't we, all of us? You know, it's true in the show, and I'm not saying for in the book, you know, book fans, I'm not saying this, but in the show version of Daemon, it's true that everything he does is self-serving. I'm not saying there isn't good in it, you know, the interviewer says the seemingly benevolent moments, they're still for his benefit. You know, and I don't think that's deniable. I don't think there's anything we've seen Daemon do on the show which isn't in some way to his benefit or something that he wants and desires. He's not a character who puts up with things that he doesn't enjoy or doesn't want, and he's very loud about that. And I feel like that's part of what makes him such a compelling character, so I I don't know why people would want to erase that in him, because that's really interesting to me. Like, the bit of love he does have for Viserys, which is definitely there, compared with his action, like, put that together with his actions, has made their relationship, I think, in the show so interesting. You know, it's just this really, it's like we're like Viserys ourselves, because we know that there's the ability to do good things in Daemon, but we're always aware also that it's quite self-serving, and we're kind of questioning it. Like, you know, is your heart in it? Like, why are you doing it? I don't know if Daemon himself knows, or if he does, he keeps his cards very close to his chest. So SARA Hess saying that he's not a good partner, where's the lie? I mean, it's true. It's very true. I mean, he literally, you know, we know he literally killed his wife. I feel like people are forgetting. You know, he really did kill his wife in a brutal manner. You know, he's not a good partner. He's with Rhaenyra. We've seen him groom her. We've seen him groom his own niece, ruin her in the eyes of people so he can obtain her. And, you know, there are people who say, you know, he does love Rhaenyra, and I don't know, you know, I'm not going to say that's a wrong interpretation. He probably does love her. Does that mean that it's not also like a self-serving thing to do, to groom your young niece in such a manner, to ruin her in front of everybody so you can obtain her? You know, it's like the Viserys thing. Like, I don't deny there's love in it, but is it a good thing to do? No. I think the relationship between him and Rhaenyra, like, he does love her and respect her in a certain way. You know, he does. And I think we see that in the awful scene where he's grooming her and he takes her to the Street of Silk, which, you know, even the music in that scene is playing like a sort of dangerous horror kind of thing. It's very interestingly done. I feel like the show was trying to really give us, this is dangerous, this is bad, you're going into a trap. It felt like she was being led into a trap from my perspective. And obviously he can't quite go through with it. So there is something in Daemon that made him think, I actually can't at the last second. Doesn't mean it was a good thing to do, though. And also, like, with Laena, I know it's different in the books, but in the show, you know, obviously he's attracted to Laena. But why is he attracted to Laena? Well, Laena's family has got the largest navy. Like, they've got the navy, they've got all the ships, they've got all the war things. He's still amassing power. You know, I don't understand people taking issue with that. I think it's because they're interpreting, saying that he's not a good or responsible brother or partner, that they're trying to imply he doesn't have love for them. And I think that might be the disconnect, because I think you can still be bad at those things and still love somebody. It's like, okay, Alicent and Viserys, for example, what we're actually witnessing is marital, you know, and a coerced girl. But, you know, you can't also deny that in the world of the story, they do love each other. Is Viserys a good husband to Alicent? No, he is not. Does he love Alicent? Yes, he does. Like, they're not conflicting things. And also, like, just in terms of the brother thing, Viserys, in that moment, feels pity for Daemon because he's lost his wife, and he welcomes him. He says, you know, do you want to come back to court? Think about that from Viserys' perspective. You find out that your brother has been grooming your niece, trying to ruin her in the eyes of people, to destroy her reputation, just so he can obtain her for marriage. Like, that's sick. And Viserys reaches out because of the grief. And Daemon's still like, I don't want anything from you. I don't understand why people feel like he's hard done by in the scene. Like, he's not really grieving his wife. He's after Rhaenyra. His brother is actually willing to forgive him for doing the worst thing. And people are still acting like, you know, oh, it was all fine. You know, poor Daemon. Poor old Daemon. It's not. It doesn't make sense. And I get that we like baddies. Like, they, you know, Kilner says here, you know, people love a baddie. We do. Like, in Game of Thrones, some of my favourite characters to watch were Cersei, for example, Jaime. I mean, Tyrion is a character who, you know, kills his girlfriend. You know, there's different shades of grey, but the difference is that I don't think people are positioning the Lannisters. Well, I suppose in Tyrion's case, I think the show kind of forgot that he killed his girlfriend. But I think, like, for example, with Jaime, he's not a hero. Like, you know, you can see heroic qualities in him, but he's also done awful things, you know. The Lannisters wouldn't go about calling themselves heroes. And I don't think, to be fair on Daemon, he would either. I think that's what's so weird about it. I feel like Daemon himself, if you asked him, like, you know, are you, like, a good guy? He would say, like, no, and I'm never gonna be, and what are you gonna do about it? Like, that's his personality. And then in this interview, it's really short, Hess teased that Fans of Daemon might be challenged again by Sunday's finale, as well as season 2, which is expected in 2024. We will see a different side of him, she said of the finale, and right now we're writing season 2 and figuring out what is the nature of his relationship with Rhaenyra. There are many interpretations in the book Fire and Blood to that. And I feel like people are... I don't know what's going to be in the final episode, but I can't see him doing anything in that episode which isn't something he's already done or has been shown capable of doing earlier in the show. You know, what could he possibly do? Because we know this is a man who, obviously he does love his family, but in his own kind of way. That's what I'm gonna emphasise. In his own way. Like, it doesn't mean he's good at those things, but in his own way he does. Does he act in responsible ways for the family? No. You know, it's just... I don't know. I think we've been shown he's not as honourable as Rhaenyra is. I think we've been warned. I mean, we've literally watched him grooming her as a teenager. Like, we literally watched that. That was part of the show. So people were thinking, oh no, I hope he's not a bad husband to Rhaenyra. What? Like, you know, I hope he's not a bad... I hope the guy who groomed his niece isn't a bad husband. I hope the man who killed his wife, his last wife, isn't a bad husband. Based on what? You're going to be so disappointed. Like, the viewers have set this man up. This man is not out here pretending to be a good husband. You know, he thinks the rules don't apply to him. He is the rogue prince. George R. R. Martin has said this himself. You know, he's a joy to write and a joy to watch because he is a law unto himself. You know, you don't know what to expect with him. I think this picture that people have of, like, him and Rhaenyra, I don't know if it's like a self-insert thing. I don't know if people maybe really like Matt Smith and they like the charisma and it's that feeling of maybe I can fix him, isn't it? It's that. But this man doesn't want to be fixed. This man does not want to be fixed. So yeah, okay, so that was one of the things, and people started hating her a lot for this Daemon thing. And I've got to be honest that I feel like the stuff that's come afterwards, from my perspective, seems like the real beef is this interview. And I don't think her perspective here is out of line. I understand people who are fans of the books having issue with the whole way the series has done it, of course. But people who've enjoyed Daemon on the show, which I know these people have because they've got him as, like, their profile picture and they love him, it's not her fault they're not interpreting the show in the way that's quite literally being given to us. You know, the show hasn't shied away from Daemon being unpredictable, a loose cannon, self-serving, dangerous, but also incredibly charismatic, so you keep thinking, you know, there's some good in him, and there is some good in him. But, you know, you never know if he's going to use it or not, you know. What's he going to do? Is he going to do a nice thing? Is he going to commit a terrible crime? Is he going to behead someone? Like, is he going to groom? Is he going to groom a family member? Like, you just don't know. So I've got to be honest, I think that's when a lot of people decided that they didn't like her. I think from that point forward, we are witnessing, like, a House of the Dragon style thing in 2022, where because of that situation and that opinion, I think people have then been digging to try and get SARA HESS. Like, I have to be honest, I've seen this happen before, because I could understand if those things that she'd said were, like, wildly ridiculous or offensive, but they weren't. They really weren't. So it feels like punishing a woman for stating something that's really obvious and there, because she dared to, like, besmirch the name of a problematic male character in the name of feminism somehow? Doesn't make sense. Okay, but then it is deeper than that, because then there's other interviews. And in these cases, I think in some ways, people are probably right. So after the last episode, we had the scene with Rhaenys bursting out of the dragon pit, and a ton of civilians died, and that is not in the books. So I've seen some people saying, criticisms I do agree with. I know a lot of people wanted to see Aegon and Sunfire, so they have a really strong dragon and rider bond, and they're saying things like, you know, why would Sunfire not have tried to defend his rider, which I'd not even thought of, and yeah, that's really valid. That would have been amazing to watch. I mean, I just say, I just tend to tell myself, you know, look, Aegon was pretty hungover and drunk. Maybe Sunfire was also, like, totally hungover and drunk, and maybe he'd been captured and, like, brought in by various other dragons. He just wanted to run for it and drink, you know, but he was too hungover. He wasn't at his best that morning. But I have seen people saying that they don't want, you know, something that was deemed to go wrong with Game of Thrones was that it kind of lent more into spectacle rather than character beats and character moments. And I can see that's a valid criticism. Like, even if I don't agree with some of the criticisms, you know, you can't deny that they're valid criticisms, like, to have. Like, they're not, like, wild, like, you know, it's fine for people to have different opinions on the fiction, of course, like, in any case, you know, even if they were saying something that, you know, I thought didn't make sense, you know, why shouldn't they criticise? I swear this kind of thing gets me so annoyed, because, you know, when I was criticising stuff in the Doctor Who fandom, which is like a beloved fandom, and you start making criticisms of media, you know, like, honestly, you get treated like, it's like, I don't know, like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, it's the worst thing. It's like, you've done the worst thing ever, like, you know, it's terrible. It's like, you know, I support anyone making criticism, like, whether I agree with it or not. And on the Doctor Who point, you know, there are people criticising, like, the new era of Doctor Who, and I have my own thoughts on it, like, some good and some bad, but I don't think unless the opinion itself is, like, sexist or, you know, anything like that, you know, it's fine. If people don't like it, they're allowed to say they don't like it and why they don't like it and explain why. You know, that's not ruining anybody's fun, is it? That's someone having an opinion, you know, that's fine. And there is this attitude of like, oh no, you're ruining our fun by having an opinion and not liking it. And it's like, if that's enough to ruin your fun, then like, I don't know. You know, how did you, I suppose because I did English Lit and creative writing, you know, for my masters, I suppose, you know, it's like second nature to analyse things. And the great writers did it themselves, you know, you'd often have like the great writers in the past who'd be in like beefs with other writers because they'd make criticisms and print them in papers and things, and, you know. I just think some people aren't like on that level of, you know, that sounds awful, but, you know, I think some people just like, no, we have to like it because it's a thing that we have and we all enjoy it and we're all part of a big group, aren't we? And we all think this thing, and I hope no one does anything different or says anything different. It makes us all feel very unsettled and unsafe and we can't enjoy it anymore. It's weird, it's cult-like, it's really cult-like, and it's in every single fandom. Biggest, you know, the Doctor Who fandom fell to this some years ago, I think, anyway. Like, because at the moment, sorry to like totally like go on a different topic here, but I think because of the sexists that decided they were going to hate on Jodie Whittaker no matter what she did, I think anybody who was actually criticising the work, whether sexist or not, has now been like bombarded by people who are doing that weird toxic positivity thing, where it's like, don't say anything bad, it's so awful to say anything bad, you're ruining it for everyone, the whole experience. It's weird. It's really, really weird. I don't like it, I don't understand it. Like, forced positivity is not a good thing. You know, if you like something, you like it. If you don't like it, you don't. You know, if you're not harming anyone else, then just, you know, people don't have to like the same things you like. So in this interview with the Hollywood Reporter, you know, they were asking why Renice didn't just like burn the whole lot of the Greens. And I mean, I can answer that anyway. Just you know, there wouldn't be a story. I know they put this in, so I guess that kind of cancels out. You know, they did decide to put this in, but, you know, they couldn't really do that. There wouldn't be a Dance of the Dragons. You know, second of all, she's not Kinslayer. You know, third, we know she's got a relationship with Alicent. She's not going to, like... Renice isn't the sort of person that's going to, like, brutally kill the person that cared for her cousin so lovingly and gave up her life doing so. It just wouldn't make sense, you know. Also, she doesn't want to start a war. Like, the whole thing is that no one wants to start a war and they want peace terms. Doing that would start a war. We know that there's going to be a massive war, but the characters don't have that knowledge. And this is another thing that frustrates me with the way people have takes on certain drama. I understand that we as the viewer know certain things, but the characters in the story don't often know the same things that we do. And that's where the drama lies. They're not unintelligent for not knowing something, a plot twist which has been foreshadowed, that we know because we've read the books or because we've had access to other scenes. See how many people, like, engage with fiction in that way, like, oh, how ridiculous, they thought such and such, when clearly so-and-so was lying, they should have known about this. It's like, but that's how fiction works. That's how fiction works. Like, they can't see everything that we can. They're not seeing the other scenes. They're only knowing the scenes they have, you know, the world they're in. And there lies the drama. So Sarah Hess kind of talks about how, you know, in this kind of like in episode 8, when we arrive in episode 8, that's when we finally have the whole cast together for the first time. To a large extent, that's when we arrive by the nature of how it's set up. It's a ball that gains momentum as it rolls. People are starting to get to know these characters. You get to see inside their hearts and minds, what they fear and what they love. You're more and more attached to them and start to understand them, and then you start anticipating what they might do and you engage with them. Okay, speaking of Alicent, one question that kept occurring to me watching the episode: does Alicent want this? Yes, she misunderstood the king's dying words, but was that what she wanted to hear anyway? Okay, Hess says, I know what my feeling is, and I later talked to Olivia about it and she had the same feeling. when she misunderstood him and hears him saying, I want Aegon to be king, which is not what he's saying, but what she sincerely understands him to be saying, that her thought in that moment was, oh effing Christ. She was genuinely ready to let it go. She was like, you know what, Rhaenyra is going to be the queen, it's fine. I'm tired of being angry all the time, I'm done, this is the end. Then he says that and she's really annoyed. Kilner says, I felt that as well. Then she goes and tells her dad. Otto thinks, oh, she's pretending she didn't really know what he said, but she knows exactly what she's doing and going up in my estimation because she's playing the game now. He can't let go of the idea that she's lying. Right, this is my take. If you watched my review I made of this episode, that's exactly what I thought, because I feel like Otto thinks, oh, well played. Well done. Now you've said that in the final moment. You were there, you're willing to attest to this. You know, it's another misunderstanding. Alicent's literally just misunderstood something. And I've seen people being like, oh, she's so ridiculous for misunderstanding him. She doesn't have the knowledge that we have. She doesn't know there's like an Aegon prophecy or anything like that. How could she know that? How could she know that? Like, your dying husband starts talking about, like, using your son's name about some prince that was promised and how you have to do this, you know, and using your son's name. I feel like it's not that wild to think, oh, okay, so he wants our son to be the prince then. She doesn't know about the prophecy, you know, she doesn't know that. Okay, the interviewer says, right, because that's what he would have done. And it sometimes feels like the show is trying to keep the audience on Alicent's side while her story arc demands that she's basically a villain. Like in a situation, like in this episode, where they're hanging all these nobles who don't bend the knee quick enough, she's complicit in this murder spree, right? She has power and agency in this situation. And she's either exercising or choosing not to exercise. Kilner says, but she wants to save her friend's life. And Hess says, I think in her mind, all this was a necessary evil. She's focused on, we're not going to kill Rhaenyra. That's ridiculous. She's Viserys' daughter. He would never have wanted this. I'm not going to let this happen. And as far as the sympathetic thing goes, in George R.R. Martin's Targaryen history book, Fire and Blood, the history was written by these unreliable narrators and nobody really knows what happened in these rooms. They know the big events that happened historically, but they don't know what anyone's intention was. And history is often written by men who write off women as crazy or hysterical or evil and conniving or gold-digging or sex-pots. Like in the book, it says Rhaenyra had kids and got fat. Well, who wrote that? We were able to step back and go, the historytellers want us to believe Alicent is an evil, conniving bitch. But is that true? Who exactly is saying that? That's part of the thing we're playing with in this and in season 2. Right, and I feel like people are being really disingenuous with this, because I don't think any of that's particularly wrong. So people are accusing her of, fat phobia and saying, you know, like, acting like Rhaenyra being called fat or putting on weight is a bad thing. But that's not what she's saying. You know, as a book reader, in the book itself, you know, something that I noticed when I was reading it is how, because it's presented through the eyes of men, you know, they're focusing on things that I don't think the women would care about. So, like, for example, oh, Alicent kept her figure after so many kids, but Rhaenyra didn't keep her kids, keep her figure, and, you know, she got big. Like, it's a bad thing. Like, that's not really a thing that, like, is important. And they just assign these ideas. You know, there's also this bit in the book about they both wanted to be the first lady of the realm. Did they? I mean, it's like the men have thought, oh, these two women just want to be the biggest, best woman here. Like, it's about that. She's not saying that it's bad that she gains weight. She's pointing out that it's written by men and that's what they say about Rhaenyra. You know, oh, she's had kids and now she's gained weight and it's a sad thing. She used to be the realm's delight. She used to be so beautiful. Oh, Alicent's kept her figure. You know, the show isn't giving us, you know, what the men in the book thought. The men writing the book who aren't real. You know, which is, oh, that's part of their enmity because, you know, Alicent remained so slender and beautiful and it's almost, and Rhaenyra didn't, you know, it's them putting their beauty standards on those characters and it's them implying that's part of the conflict. She's not at fault for this, you know, it's getting, people are deliberately framing it as though SARA HESS has said this thing, but she hasn't, you know, it's something that's in the book and what she's saying makes sense. She's not saying it's bad to gain weight after pregnancy. She's saying that that's one of the only things that was included about Rhaenyra, and it was based on, like, superficial appearance. It was the sort of thing like an old man of the time period would think about. It's not how these women would write their stories. Right, history is often written by men who write off women as crazy or hysterical or evil and conniving or gold-digging and sex-pots. That's true, and I feel like that's the point of the book. I mean, look, let's go history here because I can't resist. The wives of Henry VIII, you know, I hate to even call them that, you know, like to define them by that. But let's think. So, obviously, Catherine of Aragon, wronged wife. older used to be beautiful in her youth, but then she got old and she started wearing hair shirts and she was quite stubborn, and that was that. Anyway, the next one, Anne Boleyn, she was a homewrecker, she was conniving, she's devious, she was a witch, she was devious, she was really sexual. Not true. Anne Boleyn was very religious, she refused to be the king's mistress, she had political beliefs that made her different from Catherine of Aragon. It wasn't a case of, this woman's stealing my husband. Henry VIII was already trying to annul his marriage from Catherine of Aragon before he met Anne Boleyn anyway. Right, Jane Seymour after that. So people already think, there's a ton of things we think about Anne Boleyn that just aren't, there's nothing there. There's no proof of any of it. Jane Seymour, nobody cares because she had a son, and that's the most important thing about her. She had a son, died in childbirth. She was meek, she was mild, didn't say much, wasn't very interesting. Anyway, then we move on. Anne of Cleves, she's German, didn't know the customs, was ugly basically, smelt bad, didn't want to sleep, the king didn't want to sleep with her, so he put her aside and made her the king's sister. That's a genuine thing. People think about her, they call her the Flanders mare because they think she was ugly still. Because the men of the time made that thing. This is a woman who's coming from a foreign country, who doesn't speak the language properly, who by all accounts was like a really fine, decent person. Not that appearance even matters, but she wasn't it was like, the king didn't like her, therefore she's ugly. She's horrible. Bad smells coming from her. Right, then we got Catherine Howard. Catherine Howard, a literal groomed teenager. Not really brought up as a proper noble, she's been abused by various people in her life, and she's only a teenager. Then she gets married to the king, is forced to, have sex with this old man, and then she had an affair. She was a good time girl, she was silly, she was unintelligent, she was a ridiculous giggling girl. Yeah, she was a child. Yeah, she was a child. But was she unintelligent? No. Did she even have an affair? No, there's no proof. It's archetypes. And then, right, so let's go for Catherine Parr. She's just known as the king's nurse. Oh yeah, she kind of looked after him in his old age. What? She wrote a book. She's heavily religious. She's very intelligent. That's how those women have got back down to us. That's what we know of them. And in terms of the Game of Thrones universe, I feel like it's even meant to be further back in history than the Tudors were for us. Now, only about 500 years out, we're only 500 years out from those women, and that's what's got back to us. They're right. These writers are absolutely correct. We know the events that happened, but we have to examine different sources. When you're studying Anne Boleyn, you have to study what the people who liked her say, people who agreed with her politically, and people who hated her say. And then you can only really figure out what even happened by somehow trying to mesh them and thinking, why would they say that? Was it in their interest? It's really it's detective work. And we still don't even know if her words were her words. It's women are often blamed for the actions of their husband. It was easy in the Tudor times for the wives to take the blame for whatever Henry VIII did, because obviously no one's going to act like the king's bad, because the king's their ruler and supposed to be chosen by God. It's not wild. It's not a weird thing to say that. Right, okay, and the justifications they're making for Alicent, people are saying, they've made Alicent too nice. And I can understand if you're a book reader who, if you're in good faith, genuinely arguing because you want her to be more conniving, that's valid, because, that's an interpretation. We don't know who these people were, that's the point. So if someone's, someone has taken that and they've thought, right, so maybe she is conniving, maybe she is ambitious, that's completely valid, that's not wrong, that's an interpretation of the text. But that's not they're not wrong for doing a different version in the show, because we don't know. It's not established. We do not know. We are doing it now. The fandom is proving it, that we still can't even today, we cannot resist only understanding women in their actions. We grant men so much nuance, so much, and I don't even think we realise how much we're conditioned to do it, and it's a good thing, because we should be offering that to every person. It's not that we shouldn't be doing that for men, but the fact that we don't offer this to women, and we are conditioned as women to do this to other women, we put them into boxes. We're conditioned. I know I've been there myself. Sometimes my initial thought goes to it's this stereotype, and then I have to have a word with myself, and I think, why am I thinking that? The fandom's doing that itself. They're building an evil stepmother narrative based on things that in the show weren't evil. We were shown a coerced teenage girl, and it's the same with Sansa Stark. We've got a weird I saw a tweet the other day about someone saying that you'll watch a show like Game of Thrones where it's all morally grey, and then you'll go online and see that people think the people hate the characters that people hate the most are usually traumatized teenage girls. And it's true, and it's kind of inbuilt into us, and it makes me sad because, you know, that is the society we're in, and we are conditioned, even as women, to feel that way, you know, to be hard on ourselves. So I don't like, it's not like, you know, people who are doing this aren't like bad people, and I feel like that's what the show is giving us. Alicent is showing us that in the show, you know, Alicent is leaning into patriarchy for her benefit. And she's justifying it, you know, it's, you know, she's convincing herself of things, oh, it's a greater good, you know, all that kind of thing. They're not saying Alicent's a good character, they're saying that she deserves the complexity that, you know, it's rare that a villain character ever sees himself as a villain. Rarely, you know, that they will justify it to themselves in their head. Otto won't see himself as a villain. Daemon probably would see himself as a villain, but like as a kind of edgy thing, like for fun. I don't think he'd see himself as evil or anything like that. Viserys is a prime example. This man is so complicated and complex, and I think Paddy Considine did an amazing job because he frustrated me, I saw his humanity, I cared about him, I was angry about his treatment of people, I could feel his pain, I felt like all this burden was on him. Like, we give so much complexity to male characters and in life to men around us, and it's not a bad thing. I'm not sitting here saying we shouldn't do that. It's a really good thing to do that for other human beings. It's just that we need to learn to extend that to women as well, because we don't. I'm guilty of it. I'm very guilty of it myself. And I feel like we all need to kind of examine that, you know. And again, it's being shown with the way people are attacking SARA HESS in such a way. You know, it's really disproportionate because she insulted a male character which people liked. You know, it's really bad. You know, and they're not trying to sugarcoat Alicent because, you know, they're asked here about Alicent holding Rhaenys captive, and you know, what would Alicent have chosen to do with Rhaenys in that situation? And Hess said, I feel like she keeps on being a prisoner. Alicent's not going to chop her head off, she's more passive, she tends to let the men steamroll her in most cases. So I don't know what would have happened, but Alicent was clearly okay with just keeping her there. I don't think she would let her get murdered, but I don't think she necessarily would have set her free either. Which isn't like a defence of Alicent, is it? It's saying that yes, she is passive. She's telling herself it's fine, but she's achieving nothing. She's letting the injustice happen. You know, that people are saying, you know, oh, they're making Alicent out to be a hero character. I don't think they are. I think they're showing somebody, like they said, steamrollered into a situation, making bad decisions, wrong decisions morally, and justifying herself because she's kind of trapped. And just completely just justifying herself. Kilner says, I think Alicent believes that she is trying to keep peace and stop war, but she's just working within the patriarchy. Hess says she believes if we can just get the men to do the right thing, like if we can just get them to do the right thing. And, you know, that's... I don't understand why people would find this take to be a bad one, because for what it's saying for now about bad people and patriarchy, I think it's really valuable. You know, I actually think the show is pushing against the idea that, you know, villains see themselves as villains. You know, we are watching with empathy how Alicent is becoming an agent of the patriarchy, and how in our actual world a lot of women do it, and I'm seeing women in the fandom, unfortunately, also doing it. And it shows it with sympathy and with empathy and with understanding about how that happens. Okay, and then this is the last thing that that people bring up, and this is the one that I think, you know, is really genuinely interesting, and I've been very interested on hearing people's takes on this. So Aegon, and I've got to say as well, as a book reader, I was very interested. So obviously it's a spoiler alert. So they made Aegon in the show, they've made him into so he's quite a violent. It's a, you know, he obviously preys on somebody who's much younger than him, and in a way that really traumatises her. You know, it's not one of those murky situations, which is still a rape, but, you know, it's very clear cut, you know, and they introduced it like that. And I was surprised when they did that, because it's one of those decisions I just don't understand. Not because I support Aegon or anything like that, but just because, you know, you start a character off in that way, where do you kind of go with them? You know, it's very hard for viewers to feel that sort of sympathy once you have that. And I've kind of thought in my reading, which again is just my reading from the books, that I don't necessarily think it should be as simple as Rhaenyra is good and Aegon is bad. You know, I think it's Rhaenyra is promised this and Rhaenyra is being usurped, but Aegon isn't necessarily completely evil. You know, it's just a weird addition. I do think it's an odd addition, and I just don't quite understand it personally. You know, that's my take. But anyway, so the interviewer says, a lot of time was spent looking for Aegon, who was found wallowing in self-pity. I spoke to Tom Glyn-Carney about his character. I just have to break and say that what a standout that man is. Like, honestly, I have to admit, I'm kind of attracted to to the look that Aegon has. Like, you know, it's you know, I suppose this is my Daemon moment, you know, but then I wouldn't sit there and be like, oh, he's actually a great guy and I want him to be my partner. I just like the look of him, I guess. Like, he looks good. I have to admit, he does look good. And he expressed concern that once you introduce a character as a child, that it's tough to figure out where to go from there. Yeah, there are moments you watch him in the episode, like when he asks for his mum, like when he asks his mum if she loves him, where it seems like we're supposed to feel for Aegon. But can his character be sympathetic? Is there something even wrongish about trying for that? I'm not hinting there's some correct answer here, as I'm not sure myself. Okay, Kilner says, when I'm directing a character, I'm always on the side of the character. You just see this boy who has been neglected and cannot ever see a future for himself outside of what everyone else has told him his life is going to be. He's railing against that. In the real world, I don't have any sympathy for that's good. But for character, we are very sympathetic towards him because we were very conscious that we didn't want him to be another Joffrey. He's not a sadist. You know, I think that's unusual because, you know, the thing, you know, he's not that in the books necessarily. So it's something they added in themselves, which is interesting because if they didn't want another Joffrey, you know, it feels like something they kind of put in, which, you know, anyway. Hess says, he's the only firstborn son in the history of Westeros and in the Targaryen family who is not named his father's heir. What does that do to you? He tosses it off by pretending he doesn't give a shit, that it's stupid anyway, but he deeply cares and he's deeply crushed by it. His father's lack of trust in him eats away at his soul. He needs validation in whatever ways he can get it. And you know what? This part is very interesting, and I know a lot of Reylo fans, they like Daemon, but I'm surprised that they're not actually more attached to Aegon, because that feels... I wonder if we are getting a story of how a boy who has been born to think he is better than other people, or that he deserves something, you know, it's kind of... We have some guys in this society who are very vulnerable in their own way, they don't necessarily feel very loved, and the world is changing, and they are radicalised to think that they are being, you know, done down because women are getting more rights and things like that. And often it is people who are quite empathetic, who would otherwise be very good people, who feel injustice, and they kind of get radicalised in. And I feel like in some ways that's similar to Kylo, or what I wish they'd done in the new films. I don't think the new films are very good, but you know, what they could have done with him is really show that he was like radicalised and the kind of tragedy of that. That bit I understand, and that's why I'm surprised, because I would have thought people who were into, you know, Kylo and Rey would actually be more drawn to that as a story. Just personally, like, it seems to align better. And I understand what they're saying about sympathy for him. You know, he's the firstborn son, doesn't feel like his dad likes him, all that kind of stuff. Fair enough. You know, I definitely found myself conflicted watching his scenes, because I kind of found myself wanting to like him and feeling sorry for him, and sometimes just wanted to give him a hug or something. And then I'd have that moment where I'd think, but what has he done? Like, what was he doing? Like, why is he at these, like, horrible places doing these horrible things? You know, he's like a kid, but I don't know, it made me think a lot of things, and I don't know if the show intended... Either the show is extremely clever, or the show's made a misstep, and I don't know. Okay, so Hess continues, it's a little hard to talk about this in a way that's... I think just because somebody has committed this act, that it's not a reason that we can't have a more nuanced discussion, or to even feel sympathy for him, while acknowledging that what he did was indefensible. It's simplistic to say he someone, he's horrible and evil, and we can never find anything likeable or interesting in him. Okay, so this is uncomfortable to read. I don't think she's wrong. I don't know if I necessarily agree with the way she's worded it, but I don't think she is wrong, or that she is supporting. And I definitely think people saying that she is are kind of doing a disservice to what she's saying and the discussion, because that's not what she's saying. So I think kind of what I'm getting from this is that she's saying that don't think of themselves as evil. You know, I know it's a horrible topic, but these people, often it's a power thing, isn't it? So they feel disempowered, not as an excuse as in that's, you know, that's why they do it, but as in sometimes, I mean, I am interested in looking at the root of things like that. I do find that very interesting. He's horrible and evil and we can never find anything likeable or interesting in him. I don't know what I make of that. It depends what the show does. Like, if the show goes for, you know, people like that are among you and, you know, they think of themselves as fine and this is how they justify it, that would be very interesting. But I don't know. I don't know if that's what they've done. They've seemed to make him, they've made him quite a, you know, they really showed us his victim who was absolutely traumatised, and I guess he was saying, you know, it's not a big deal, but I think the fact they made her so young and took away any of that, it's just hard to paint it as if he didn't know what he was doing. You know, like, there is something to be said. I feel like it would be very intelligent if the show went with the idea that Viserys himself is a of the time, but the time period, you know, Aegon has watched his father, or he knows in his life what he's seen, is that even in a supposedly good marriage, he's seen a woman be forced to do sexual acts and have her body used when she doesn't want that. That would have been interesting for him, but I think that the way they've made him such a willing and, like, you know, there's no grey area. Not that there's a grey area from our perspective, but for him, if that makes sense, in his head, because of how he's justifying himself and how his psychology would work. It just doesn't seem to work for me. If they were going to go for the whole, you know, he's seen his mother, you know, be treated this way, he thinks that's normal, that to me would be more believable and more impactful with what they want us to think, actually. Okay, I worked on a story about this in Orange is the New Black, where we had a character who was raped, and then we dealt with the feelings of her rapist, who at the time did not understand he was raping this woman, because he thought, like, oh, she's my girl, I love her, and she's just not into it. I think there are many otherwise fairly decent, upstanding men walking around this world who possibly committed some kind of unwanted sexual advance in college and have no idea what kind of effect it had on the person, and genuinely think of themselves as a good person. While for the person in that room with them, it was received in a completely different way. Nobody's ever taught Aegon about consent or what a relationship is supposed to look like, and his mother married his father when she was 16. So this is a very long way of saying it's more complicated than you rape somebody and this is the end of your story. And actually, we improvised the "Do you love me" line on set. Now, this bit doesn't make sense to me. Not, you know, she's definitely not pro in what she's saying, and I think people putting it that way are really, I think it's pretty bad the way people are presenting it that way. You know, she's clearly not saying that. She's talking about how, obviously, we know how bad it is, and for a victim it's awful, but these people who do this, these men, well, they're not always men, you know, justify themselves. Like, you know, they make excuses for themselves and they don't think it was so bad, you know, it's just another day for them because it's not a consent thing. Which makes sense, you know, if they were going to go with the whole, you know, Aegon didn't know about consent, like, you know, he's used to thinking he's better than everyone else because he's a Targaryen, he's seen his mother getting, you know, abused by his father and everyone thinking that's fine. But the thing that I don't understand is that, you know, she's kind of talking about a situation where it's a couple, but what we saw in the show was actually some serving girl that's very young and very traumatised, and that there couldn't have been a mistake in that. You know? That's the bit that doesn't make sense to me. But I think to say that she is supporting that, and what people are saying about that, you know, she's not defending, you know, when I know it's uncomfortable because she's saying, you know, I think there are many otherwise fairly decent, upstanding men who possibly committed some kind of unwanted sexual advance, etc., etc., etc. I understand why it seems bad to say that, but I don't think what she's saying in the context of what she's saying is that they're fine. I think she is saying that what I think a lot of people, a lot of feminists, but not just feminists, you know, people who just care about this kind of thing, have been saying for a long time, which is that we only think of as violent, you know, we don't necessarily think about coercion, we don't think about other elements, which is why, you know, we need better education, because you know, someone might not think they're, for example, if they're with their spouse like Viserys and Alicent, they might not consider themselves a rapist, but obviously they are if the person doesn't want that. You know, it is complicated in that sense, not as in what's right or wrong, but the way that people and society perceives that issue. But again, it contradicts the actual episode, because there's no way that Aegon thought that, you know, I don't understand that. It does seem like the episode did contradict itself, like this guy is hanging out in places where children are literally fighting each other, It looked like one of his children, like one of his own children, might be having to fight someone. You know, it didn't make sense. But I do think, I agree it doesn't make sense as a criticism, but I think people trying to act like she is somehow pro is wrong. I can understand the take as well about, you know, focusing on the and their experience. That's a valid criticism, because, you know, shouldn't it be more about the victim? I can see that perspective, and some people have made it very well. You know, they've put that point across. But she's not saying... I just feel like the way people are doing this to her is literally what the show is trying not to have us think about the characters in itself. You know, it's that woman bad, therefore all the bad things, you know, this is the worst possible interpretation you can have because she's bad, you know. And I can't help but think that so much of this is because of what she said about Daemon, I have to be honest. And it just, you know, this is a real woman in the actual real world. And, you know, I just think people are unfair. You know, I like that she's saying about, you know, his mother married his father when she was 16. You know, and also, you know, it's more complicated than you rape somebody, this is the end of your story. You know, that's it depends where they're going to go with it. You know, if they're going to be smart, you know, maybe they'll explore that idea. Maybe they'll explore consent and it will be valuable. I feel like they've misstepped with it. I personally don't think they've done it in a way which really gives the message they want. But I will wait and see what happens. But for me, I can't see that they're going to achieve what they want with that. And I guess it depends what they mean by this isn't the end of your story. Like, you know, it depends. They can't really give him like a redemption arc, can they? Like, you know. That being said, I remember in Game of Thrones when, you know, I think we all just collectively decided to ignore the fact that they randomly wrote that Jaime Cersei, which I know in the book it's different because it is a kind of, you know, it depends on your interpretation. That's a weird one. But, you know, the way they did it in the show, and then that Jaime just went on, like, to carry on. Like, you know, the way the original Game of Thrones dealt with you know, assault and things like that was pretty bad. You know, I remember the Sansa thing and being really shocked by that, because it didn't happen in the book, and, you know, it focused on Theon, and, you know, I do trust these writers to give I kind of trust the writers to give the women more, you know, more focus, but I don't know. I just don't know where they're going with it, but, you know, and one thing as well, just before I go as well, they're saying, some people are saying that, you know, she put the Laris foot thing in that wasn't in the actual book, and that's a really bad thing to do. And I think I've said in a review that obviously I didn't want to see it, didn't really need to be there. But it does make sense in terms of the narrative. Like, it doesn't, as a storytelling thing, it's kind of does make sense, because Alicent is experiencing patriarchy where she's on a pedestal. It's that weird Victorian version, isn't it? It's like, you're pure, but you can't get any enjoyment out of it. My enjoyment is you being pure and detached, and you not enjoying it. I'm just like gazing at you, and you're not involved in it at all. You know, it's not about you, which is kind of a metaphor for her whole life, isn't it? You know, no one cares about her. The people who are on her side don't care about her as a person. It's as this, like, icon of, like, patriarchy and how a woman should behave, you know. Anyway, so I'd like to know what you kind of think about this. I know it's a really complicated topic and, you know, not a nice one to discuss, but I do feel that this writer is being, like, unfairly targeted. I don't mind people criticising her decisions at all, like, that's fine. Sometimes I see criticisms of what they do in the show, and they're things I haven't even thought of, and then I'll see it and I'll be like, oh my god, yeah, you're right, like, that would have been amazing, that was a misstep. But, yeah, I can't help but think that a lot of this is aimed at her because she dared to get at Daemon, really, and again, I'd understand if they were book readers of Daemon who are angry, but these are people who has liked him in the show and have just willfully ignored the fact that they've shown him being someone who isn't a good partner or a good brother or a good father. I know that's different to the books. Well, as far as we know, you know, obviously it's unreliable, but that, to me, it feels like she's getting a lot of attacks because of that. So, yeah, anyway, this is a really long one, and quite a serious one, but I hope you're all doing really well. I will be making other videos that aren't House of the Dragon based, but it's my thing right now. And last night I lost a really beloved character, and I was really sad, so this is, you know, trying to change the subject in my mind. So I love your notes, tell me what you think, and see you really soon. Alright, bye!